Com.
Hello, I'm Allison Byerly, president of Lafayette College in Easton, PA. Today, many of our students had the opportunity to vote for the very first time in a presidential election. And tonight, we're very pleased that students will be able to share some expert commentary and election results with you right here on PBS 39. At Lafayette, we're a very politically engaged and socially aware campus, so as you can imagine, there's been lots of commentary about this election. We're glad that you've chosen to tune in to tonight's broadcast, and we hope you'll share your own thoughts and comments on social media as well. Enjoy the broadcast.
Live from Easton, Pennsylvania, PBS 39 and Lafayette College present their coverage of the 2016 elections. More than 100 students from majors ranging from policy studies to geology have combined their expertise to provide up-to-the-minute results and analysis of today's election from the next generation of leaders. Here are your hosts for First Vote in a Polarized Age, Cat Stevens and Frank Aluzzi.
Do you remember your first presidential election? Who did you vote for? Did you vote at all? I'm Frank Aluzzi.
And I'm Cat Stevens. For 17 million Americans and the 2,500 students at Lafayette College, this is our first. We're coming of age politically this year.
We're broadcasting live from Farallon Student Center on the campus of Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania.
Most of what millennials know about the candidates comes from The Daily Show or Weekend Update. We get our news from Twitter and Reddit.
We would prefer to vote on an app on our phone than in a booth in person. No one ever polls us.
And they don't need to. The data scientists who mine our internet history know our political tastes pretty well already.
They can predict who we plan to vote for and if we're going to vote at all. Tonight we'll take a fresh look at the elections, politics, and the issues that matter through the eyes and words of first-time voters.
All of our results for the evening will come from our political desk, which is anchored by Carla Talley. Carla?
Thanks, Kat. I'll deliver up-to-the-minute returns from around the nation for the headline presidential race, the 34 Senate seats, and the 435 House seats up for election tonight, paying particular attention to the state of Pennsylvania. It's after 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and polls are closed in 15 states across the country. And the numbers are rolling in, and at this point, we can confidently project the outcomes of those states. Based on the electoral votes won in those states, and projections for future states such as California and North Dakota that we can confidently project, we have established the following Electoral College baselines for each candidate. We see that based on this baseline, Secretary Clinton has 210 projected electoral votes, with Mr. Trump trailing behind at 197 projected votes. I'll be joined throughout the night by fellow analysts Chris Burns and Andrew Rogopchik. Chris and Andrew, what can we expect tonight in the presidential race?
Thanks, Carla. It's great to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much to GIS and 271.com for these fantastic interactive maps we have to use this evening. As you said, the electoral map, as it is situated right now, leans slightly in Secretary Clinton's favor. So let's go over some scenarios in which Donald Trump can win the White House. Number one, Trump has to win every single state that Mitt Romney turned red in 2012. Number two, Trump has to win nearly every big battleground state, meaning that the states of Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and possibly a New Hampshire have to go red. And lastly, Trump has to swing a perennially blue state towards the Republicans. In my mind, I think Michigan could possibly go red, giving Donald Trump 279 electoral votes and making him the 45th president of the United States.
Yeah, and Secretary Clinton has a much easier path to the White House. She's most likely going to win Pennsylvania and Virginia. Virginia has been a little closer in the early voting, but Richmond going to come out strong, and I think it's going to go to Secretary Clinton. I also see Secretary Clinton winning New Hampshire. It's a perennially blue state, and it doesn't look like it's going to switch this election. However, it is going to be close. From there, she's definitely going to win Colorado, and Nevada has been tight in the polls. Mr. Trump's been in the lead by about 1 to 2 points over the last few weeks. However, the Democratic Party in Nevada is really strong with their voter turnout, and it looks like Nevada is going to go blue. Obviously, we're going to have to wait a little bit. It's out west, but the map looks like it is leaning towards Secretary Clinton.
Well, great. We're also going to be talking about the senatorial races tonight. So what can you guys tell us about that?
Right, Carla. So the Senate races are equally important as the presidential race. Democrats need to win 4 seats with the White House and 5 seats with a Donald Trump presidency win tonight. So let's look at some key races on the East Coast. In New Hampshire, Republican incumbent Senator Kelly Ayotte's been in a very tight race against New Hampshire's Democratic Governor Maggie Hassan. It's been a 1 to 2 point race for about a couple weeks now. I'm going to give that to Senator Kelly Ayotte. Moving down to Pennsylvania, we have Republican Senator incumbent Pat Toomey running against former Clinton aide and Governor Ed Rendell's cabinet member Katie McGinty. Also an extremely tight race. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been pumped in this race. It's close, but I'm going to give that one to Toomey as well. Moving down to North Carolina, another tight race between Republican incumbent Senator Richard Burr and his challenger, former North Carolina State Representative Deborah Ross. I'm also going to give that one to the Republicans. So although all these races are tight, I think New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina stay red, Carla.
Yeah, the Midwest and the West is where the Democrats are going to pick up their seats. Wisconsin has Russ Feingold back to claim his seat from Republican incumbent Ron Johnson. He was senator 6 years ago, and in a presidential year with more turnout, it looks like it's probably going to go to Russ Feingold. Illinois was already flipped towards the Democrats. Tammy Duckworth ran a really strong campaign. War hero, she's a great candidate, and that's going to definitely help the Democrats in this election. Missouri is an unexpected state for the Democrats to challenge in. Jason Kanders run a great campaign. He is the Secretary of State of Missouri and has already won a statewide election, showing he could beat Republican incumbent Roy Blunt. Finally, out in Nevada, it's Harry Reid's old seat. From there, Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic challenger, she has to win that to retain the advantage that the Democrats could potentially gain from winning 4 states throughout the country.
Well, thanks. We'll be back with more results in just a few moments. So now we're going to head back to Kat and Frank.
Thank you, Carla. We'll be scanning traditional and social media to see what's trending and how people are reacting to the vote count throughout the evening. For that, we go to our own Jackie Drago and Connor Bitterman. What's the mood like out there at this point?
Thanks, Kat and Frank. Welcome to the Media Desk. I'm Connor Bitterman.
And I'm Jackie Drago. Connor and I will be with you throughout the night, giving you the latest updates in media headlines and what's trending. Currently, we're here with Wataru Ando talking about the election forecasting competition at Lafayette College. What can you tell us about this competition?
So, in parallel to this election broadcast, we are running a campus-wide election forecasting contest. We've asked the students of Lafayette to predict the outcome of the 30 closest House, Senate, and the presidential race.
Yeah, thanks again, Wataru, for putting together such a cool and interactive experience for Lafayette students to be involved in this year's election. What is the winner of this competition going to receive?
The winner of this competition, or the student who predicted the most out of these 30 races, will receive 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to the inaugural ball, and $1,000 to cover the expenses.
Wow, what an amazing prize. I wish we had the chance to get that.
I know, it's crazy.
How many students were involved in this?
We had over 500 submissions out of the 2,500 students on campus, which tells me that a lot of people are excited about this prize.
Tell us, Wataru, there are so many close races out there. It's such a tight-knit election across the board. How is it going to be determined who's going to win, and what close races should we keep an eye on throughout the evening?
I think the closest races to predict in this contest will be Nevada, North Carolina, and Florida for the presidential and the Penn House races.
Our results team is going to be with us for the rest of the night, giving us the results on the latest close election. Join the conversation and follow us on social media. Follow our Twitter page, LC Policy Studies, and answer our questions, and your tweet might be featured later. Back to you, Kat and Frank.
We're joined now by one of our student producers, Rachel Robertson, and one of our production partners, Laura McHugh from PBS 39.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for joining us and watching tonight. We also want to thank Lafayette College for inviting us to participate in this exciting event. As 18 to 35-year-olds now make up the largest group of voters in the United States, we are very proud at PBS 39 to give you a voice on public media during this historic election. Under the leadership of Professor Mark Crane and Professor Nicole Crane, we've been honored to work with students as they've created a series of video segments that you'll see throughout the evening.
And we have worked all semester on these video segments. We have 7 classes, over 120 students who have put thousands of hours writing, shooting, and producing these video segments. We wanted to take an in-depth look at what first-time voters like ourselves were worried about, but also what everyone else in the nation was worried about as well. For example, I took an in-depth look at the uncertain future of the healthcare industry, but we also look at the role of big data in this election, the concerns that small businesses have, as well as what democracy looks like around the world. We're very proud of these video essays. We've worked really hard on them, and we're very excited for you to see them throughout the rest of the night.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Laura. For many young people, today was the first time they voted in an election.
We caught up with some Lafayette students to see how this election has shaped their political thoughts.
Yes, I am voting this year.
Yes, I am voting.
I'm voting because I feel like it's my duty as a citizen.
It's too important not to vote.
Although many students are excited, with this election also comes doubt.
People my age aren't voting because they've been told that their vote is not important.
I'd like to see a better policy basis from both candidates before actually making a decision.
They are finding issues that matter to them.
I think that two of the most important issues in this election are healthcare and immigration laws.
Immigration.
Healthcare, gun control,
the economy and immigration.
Trade agreements.
Definitely international relations.
Our national security, and our economy.
And even though this is their first time voting, they already have suggestions for change.
If I can change one thing about the political process, it would be to educate people more, not only about the candidates, but about the process itself.
I would have the candidates focus more on the issues and less on personal attacks.
Our party lines and being more open to third parties.
Who's running for president? I would change that.
Whether dissatisfied or excited for their first voting opportunity, Lafayette students have plenty of ideas for the future of American politics. For PBS 39 in Lafayette College, I'm Katie Kidder with Cameron Schultz, Sohrab Pasakani, and Catherine Stevens reporting.
Our student community has a lot to say, not only about the candidates, but also about the issues.
We've designed something we call the bullpen to give students a forum to discuss the many things on their minds. Our first bullpen is moderated by Barker Carlock. What's the first topic, Barker?
Thank you, Frank and Kat, and good evening. Welcome to the bullpen, designed to give you, the viewer, access to what we think as young voters. I'm Barker Carlock, and I will be one of your moderators this evening. I'm joined with Luis Espinal, Joseph Sayum, Kathleen Nolan, and Kayla McGee. So let's get to it. We have just voted in what is an incredibly polarized age. So I want to begin by asking each of you, what has been the most important thing to you this election? Kathleen, I wonder if you could start off for us.
Sure. For me personally, I think one of the most important things in this election has been personality. I would like to have said it would have been policy, but we haven't really seen much of that in any of the debates that I've watched. Much of the articles have been more about personality slinging than anything else. And I think in a leader, we do need a certain personality type. So when I cast my vote this morning, it did have a lot to do with their personality more than their policies.
Interesting. Joseph, what is important to you this election?
This election, I'm not voting, but due to an age requirement, I'm a couple weeks too young. But I understand the importance of staying in the media and related to politics and staying active within the social media and the whole ability to stay updated with the media. So,
great. Kayla, what about you?
I mean, for me, one of the most important issues and the reasons why I voted for the candidate I voted for was because of their immigration and Syrian refugee policy. And I felt like that was a really big issue for me. And I felt like each candidate had their separate views and they were quite polarized and quite different. So I felt like I decided to vote for a candidate based on that.
Great. Luis, what about you?
Well, as a permanent resident, unfortunately, I can't vote. But one of the issues that I see that has the most weight and the most importance is access to healthcare. Healthcare when it comes to young people, to minority populations, and in general, just accessibility to it.
Great. Well, so this is really interesting to get all of your perspectives on sort of really what is important to you, but I want to hear now about what your motivation and strategy in voting is. So I wonder if we could come back to you, Kathleen, and talk about how are you voting?
Personally, I voted based on extensive research. I take it very seriously. I looked up not only the presidential candidate, but my House of Representatives candidate who was running, down to the Board of Ed that was running in my hometown. I really wanted to make sure I understood every single candidate's platform and which one I agreed with the most. I didn't think it was just solely based on one article here or the general college's trend toward lean liberal. I really wanted to make sure that I was as educated as I could possibly be before I made this decision about my vote.
Great. And Joseph, I know that you mentioned that you're not of age to vote yet, but I wonder, how did you think you had an impact on this election
Well, during the election, going for the past few months of the election, and during the primaries and season the past year, there have been going door to door, knocking on doors for Pennsylvania, making sure people are going and out there and getting ready to vote, and being able to also stay informed because during this day and age, social media has been a major impact on our ability to access information and learn from other sources, and there's been a wide variety of that. So I've been able to go out there and make sure people are voting, and staying informed is like the number one thing because issues like the candidates' responsibilities this season is of key importance because we've heard a lot of things about candidates and major important points that they've brought apart. So staying informed is key, I think.
Great. And Kayla, where are you from and how have you voted?
I'm from New Jersey, and I personally decided to vote in New Jersey. I just felt, I lived there for 18 years, and I only lived in Pennsylvania for 1 year, so I felt like that's where I owed my vote to, and I also felt like I wanted to vote for my House of Representatives. Great.
So the theme of tonight is that we casted our first vote in a polarized age. How do we feel?
Uneasy.
So uneasy.
Very excited.
Very
I'm
excited.
Yeah.
You're excited. Okay, wonderful. Well, I think that's all we have for now, so we are going to throw it back to you, Frank and Kat. Thank you.
Thanks, Barker. More numbers are coming in as this historic election night shapes up. Our political desk is standing by to sort out the latest results. For that, we go to Carla Talley. Carla?
Thanks, Frank. We have some interesting results that just came in. We see that in the state of Virginia, Mr. Trump is leading with 0.3 points, and 82% of the votes have been turned in for this state, so it's still pending. We see that in the state of Florida. Mr. Trump is also leading as well in the state of Ohio. And when we turn to the state of North Carolina, we see that it's a tie as of now. So now we're going to talk to our student analysts, Chris and Andrew, who are going to tell us a little bit more about the 4 big states, which include Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, and North Carolina. Chris, what do you think about the state of North Carolina and Florida?
Yeah, they're incredibly important states. North Carolina and Florida are going to tell us whether minorities are coming out to vote for Secretary Clinton. North Carolina has had some what I would call voter suppression laws coming in this year. It's really voter ID laws, but it makes it harder, and it makes it harder to vote and targets minorities. So North Carolina is really going to show whether Secretary Clinton can get her base to come out to vote. Florida, on the other hand, has a very diverse population. Florida has a focus on Latinos for Secretary Clinton. If she's going to win the state, she's going to have to drive out Latinos in the state of Florida. There's this interesting county called Hillsborough County in Tampa Bay. Since 1960, Hillsborough County, the way that it has gone is the way that the state has gone. So that's a county we're going to be looking at throughout the night. And for Pennsylvania and Ohio, Andrew's got that one.
Right, so PA and Ohio are always 2 pretty big swing states, at least in recent elections. With Pennsylvania, we've had both the Trump camp and the Clinton camp saying that they're confident that they will win that state. Last night, Hillary Clinton held a rally in Philadelphia, and that's basically underscores the importance of PA. Trump has a wide appeal to a lot of blue-collar coal and steel workers in the Pittsburgh area, more western PA, while Hillary Clinton has more of an appeal in eastern PA, the cities of Philadelphia, as well as the city of Pittsburgh. Those urban centers, African-American, Hispanic, minority voters are going to come out likely in large numbers for Hillary Clinton. Ohio equally is important. No Republican president has ever won the White House without winning the state of Ohio. Very similar to Western PA, Eastern Ohio, and also Central Ohio has a lot of blue-collar, steel, coal miners who are drawn to Mr. Trump. Of course, Hillary Clinton had a pretty significant gap a few months ago, saying that under her policies, thousands of coal miners will lose their jobs. I think that right there could play into Mr. Trump winning the states of PA and Ohio.
Well, that's very interesting. Now we're going to turn to our Senate races. Sorry about that, the map isn't working, but we see that in the Senate race in New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, the Democrat candidate, she's leading by +5 points, and only 15% of the vote has been in for this. But Andrew, what do you think about this? Is this something that we could expect?
As I said earlier, I am quite surprised that Governor Hassan is ahead by that large of a margin, 5 points. It's going to be a very tight race. Not all the results have been counted. I think it'll ultimately be a 1 or 2 point race. I'd still give this one to Senator Ayotte, so let's not jump to any conclusions here.
And Chris, do you have anything to say about the Senate races as we see in the big 4 states that we're talking about, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina?
Yeah, in the senatorial race in Pennsylvania, it's an incredibly important race. It's shown by the amount of money that has been dumped into it by outside spenders. It's up to over $160 million spent. The previous record was $114 million spent in North Carolina in 2012. The amount of money is insane. If you watch TV or listen to radio in Pennsylvania, you're going to hear a Pat Toomey or Katie McGinty ad throughout the time that you're listening. And you're also going to see it be mostly negative. The campaign's been incredibly negative. Katie McGinty's not that strong a candidate. She doesn't have the same experience that Pat Toomey has. So the Pat Toomey camp is going to really drive home that lack of experience. On the other hand, Pat Toomey has had a terrible history with women voters. He's said that he wants to penalize women that get abortions. So it's really a negative campaign, pretty dark for our democracy. But I got to say, it's probably going to go to Katie McGinty. The money is just pouring in her direction.
So in this race, in these elections this year, we see that a lot of times there's the Republican incumbent who's a man who's running against a Democratic woman who's challenging this person. Is this something that we think is attributed to Hillary Clinton running for president, the increase in the Democratic women who are challenging these Republican men in office?
I think it has something to do with it. We mentioned the Illinois Senate race earlier. Representative Tammy Duckworth won a double digit against her opponent to take that seat away from the Republicans. I'm not sure if it's a direct correlation, but it definitely plays into the whole male white Republican versus a more liberal woman.
Yeah, the stats say that the Democratic Party is much more diverse racially and gender-wise. So you're going to see more Democratic senators. You're going to see Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. She has to keep Harry Reid's old seat. Tammy Duckworth, as Andrew said, and then and Kelly Ayotte, Maggie Hassan, two women in New Hampshire, Katie McGinty, Pennsylvania. So I would say it's definitely having effect with Hillary Clinton's candidacy for presidency.
Well, thanks. We'll be back with more results in just a few minutes. So now we're going to head back to the main desk with Frank and Kat.
Today, millions of American citizens have participated in one of the most controversial elections in recent memory. What is it that separates this election from years past?
Elise Avinsky shares her research on the presence and effect of social media on the candidates' campaign platforms.
Think about the last time you heard about the presidential election. Was it on the internet? Because the ubiquity of social media is on the rise, politicians are harnessing different platforms to reach out to their audience. Social media provides an easy way to broadcast incredible amounts of information to a large number of people in a short amount of time. The information seen online educates Americans on who is running for office, as well as influencing citizens to go vote. Politicians generally use social networking sites with two main goals. The first is to mobilize their party and their campaign, spreading information across the world with just the click of a few buttons. The second is to enhance their reputation, to increase their power, influence, and autonomy. Social media has become more prevalent over the past decade. A Pew Research Center study found that the percent of news consumers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram has increased in the last 3 years by between 7 and 19%. While an incredible number of sites have seen increases in their news-related viewership, Facebook takes the lead in overall use. 44 of the 67% of adults who have Facebook accounts use the site to get news. The wide generational gap between social media users can be explained by the relatively recent popularity of networking sites. Because they have fairly recently been created, most sites are dominated by younger people. 58% of Instagram users fell between the ages of 18 and 29, while only 2% of Instagram users were 65 or older. Similarly, 18 to 29-year-olds make up 38% of Twitter's users and 31% of Facebook's, but individuals 65 and older only make up 3 and 8% of Twitter's and Facebook's viewership. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Elise Avinsky with Kyle Stout and Colin Bradley reporting.
So we've seen how all media has shaped the candidates, their platforms, and the issues.
Turning back to our media desk now, are we seeing differences in the way the results are being reported tonight?
Welcome back to the Media Desk. Throughout the night, we're going to be looking at a variety of different news and media sources, determining what they feel is the most noteworthy headlines throughout the night of the election.
As we looked at major media, we looked into their headlines, and CNN is currently reporting first exit polls, voters scared and concerned if either Trump or Clinton wins. more than half of our nation's voters would feel concerned or scared if Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump were to be elected. 58% of the electorate said they would believe that if Trump wins, they would be concerned, whereas 53% would feel concerned if Clinton is on top. 39% of the electorate feels like they would be excited or optimistic if with a Trump presidency, whereas a 43% would be excited about another Clinton in the White House. So it's very interesting to see how more people are less excited about this than they are afraid.
Yeah, sometimes it comes down to the lesser of two evils when punching the ticket for the candidate of your choice.
So true, Connor. And what is Fox saying right now?
Yeah, recently breaking news on Fox, Donald Trump is projected to win Indiana and Kentucky, while recently Hillary Clinton has taken the victory in the state of Vermont as the polls have recently closed in that state. Fox News projects that Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump is projected to win West Virginia, Kentucky, and Indiana, where it just so happens that Mike Pence, his running mate, happens to be the governor. Donald Trump has voiced a great confidence reported by Fox News, claiming that we are going to win a lot of states tonight. So it's great to see that Donald Trump feels good about his position right now in the election. Hillary Clinton has a small lead in North Carolina, where Tim Kaine serves as the state's junior senator, but it's still too early to tell who's going to win the state of North Carolina. While in North Carolina, though, Hillary Clinton has said that we need to bridge the gap between the two parties, and having discussions with Lafayette College students, they tend to agree.
It's quite interesting to see how Fox and CNN are reporting this election so far. Stay with us and follow us on our social media pages. Back to you, Kat and Frank.
The discussions over media coverage are reflecting what we're seeing as the results come in. For an update, Carla Talley is standing by. Carla?
Thanks, Kat. So we're going to talk about the states of New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Virginia, and the presidential races. So in New Hampshire, it's a tie right now as far as we can see, with 19% of the votes being in right now. And in Pennsylvania, there's still not enough information for us to know, but we see that 12% of the vote is in. In Florida, we see that Trump is up by 1.6%, and 94% of the votes are in. And in the state of Virginia, we see that Mr. Trump is also leading by 2 points, with 74% of the votes being in. And when we turn to the Senate races, we see that in the state of North Carolina, we see that Republican candidate Burr is leading by 3 points, with 38% of the votes being in. And when we turn to Pennsylvania, we see that McGuinty is leading by 3.1 points, with 12% of the votes being in. So now we're going to turn to our student analysts, Chris and Andrew, to hear a little bit about this. Is this surprising results that we see in the presidential and the Senate races?
Nothing too surprising so far. I think looking at the presidential race, two somewhat surprising states are New Hampshire and Virginia. New Hampshire is a state that Trump said he felt confident about. The Trump camp continually said they felt like they could win, but most polls had Clinton winning New Hampshire. Let's remember New Hampshire was the first primary, but Donald Trump won. He has a lot of evangelical support up there. But even so, it's only 4 electoral votes, not going to make that huge of a difference. I think Virginia is very surprising. Virginia is a state that has typically gone blue. Most expected it to go blue. Clinton's vice president, her running mate, Senator Tim Kaine, is from Virginia. I think when she picked Tim Kaine, a lot of Democrats and Secretary Clinton herself would have assumed that Virginia was a bit of a shoo-in to go blue, but we'll see. It may go red after these early results come in.
Yeah, a huge state is Florida. Honestly, Mr. Trump needs to win Florida to win this election. For Florida to have 93% of the votes in, and for Mr. Trump to be up by 1.6% is huge, as he'd say. With the rest of the states coming in, I mean, he's still got to win Ohio, still got to win North Carolina. I still see Secretary Clinton winning. I believe she's still got Pennsylvania in the bag. Philadelphia has so many votes, and honestly, they're all going to Secretary Clinton. But Florida, for Mr. Trump to get it, that is his first step to the presidency. Without Florida, he doesn't get there, but with Florida, he has a legitimate shot of being the next president of the United States.
That's very interesting. Are there any other states up here tonight that we really are going to want to focus on other than Florida?
I think there are some states to focus on, but let's look at some of the Senate races you mentioned. New Hampshire, again, Kelly Ayotte versus Maggie Hassan, going to be a tight one. As I've been saying, I think it's too early to make any definitive conclusion with that race. And then in PA, as Chris mentioned earlier, the most expensive Senate race, in American campaign history. Over $160 million were pumped into that race. McGuinty, a lot of criticized her for not being that great of a candidate. Toomey's been a pretty effective senator. I'm from Pennsylvania myself. I think that Based off a lot of the climate I've seen here in PA, most people are happy with his tenure as senator, and I think he will retain that seat, despite these early results.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at North Carolina, Richard Burr and Deborah Ross are in a tight race, and that's very good for the senatorial race for the Democrats. Richard Burr has really not distanced himself from Mr. Trump like someone like Kelly Ayotte has. Kelly Ayotte said she would not be voting for Mr. Trump and instead wrote in an independent candidate, Evan McMullin. But Richard Burr is tightly related to Mr. Trump. Deborah Ross, as a Democrat in a state that's a swing state for the presidential contest, she has a decent chance of winning. For it to be tight, that's very good for senatorial candidates across the country that are Democrat, and not so great for the Republican Party in terms of retaining power of the Senate.
Well, thanks. That's very interesting news, and we'll be back with more results in just a few minutes. So now we're going to head back to Frank and Kat.
Thank you, Carla. This election, Secretary Clinton has the chance to shatter what she once called the highest, hardest glass ceiling in American history.
What are women in America saying about this historic race and the impact it has on them?
The United States is often referred to as the land of opportunity. But when it comes to women in politics, would you believe the U.S. ranks 97th in the world for its political representation of women? Robin Weissman, the Secretary of Banking and Securities for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is one woman who has defied the odds.
Nationally, we have just under 20% representation of women in the U.S. Congress, and in Pennsylvania, it's even less. It's under 19%.
Women hold 84 of 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and 20 of 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. Worldwide, of the 179 heads of government, only 14 are women. The nation boasting the highest representation of women? Rwanda. Almost 2 out of every 3 members of its national parliament are female. So in the United States, what stops women from running for office? We posed that question to Pennsylvania State Senator Lisa Boscola, as well as Weissman.
Most women, and I don't think about themselves as running for office. They think about other roles and other professions prior to thinking about politics.
Once you are a woman candidate or female candidate, there is challenges. You know, it's harder to raise money. I don't care what anybody says. You know, it's harder to raise money, and it's hard for women to ask for money.
So could a female president change the trajectory of women in politics?
I'd like to say it will be enormous, but I think it will provide incremental change. But this will signify to women that they can have limitless ambition.
For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Kayla McGee with Lauren Hughes, Margie Lewis, and Karina Anderson reporting.
These are the kinds of issues everyone has been talking about this fall.
For more discussions about what's on the minds of Lafayette students, we go back over to the bullpen, this time moderated by Cameron Schultz.
Thanks, Frank and Kat. Welcome, guys, and back to the bullpen. I'm joined here with Aiden Trevison, Brenda Del Rio, Nolan, and Wangala Samata. Welcome, guys. This round, we're going to be talking about the issue of immigration. It's been a hot button topic throughout the election cycle, and we're going to jump right in and get your thoughts. Brenda, I'm going to start with you.
So I definitely think that immigration has been a problem. There are a lot of issues surrounding it, and this election has brought up a lot of stigmas, and if anything has heightened a lot of things between it. Some things that I'm very concerned about with some policies. I definitely agree with a lot of Hillary Clinton's policy as a first-generation immigrant, which meaning that my mother is an immigrant from Mexico. I understand the struggles that a lot of immigrants face and the hardship that they face when it comes to trying to become a citizen in the U.S. So some of the policies that I definitely think that should be passed are DACA, which is a Deferred Action for Children's Actions Act, which essentially allows them to go to college here and allows them to have an education and allows them to have a work permit as well. And then in a similar manner, it allows parents who have children to be able to stay in the U.S. And although they aren't exactly titled as citizens, it does shield them from deportation. And I think that's something that's really important, especially because I myself and a lot of my family members and my friends deal with that problem every single day.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that immigration has been a controversial issue in the United States for quite a while now, only because
Americans are worried about illegal immigrants obviously entering the United States, but that being said, I have to agree more with Hillary Clinton's point of view of allowing illegal immigrants to have the opportunity to try to become a citizen of America rather than Trump's view of just building a wall and not letting them in at all. I agree that humans should have the opportunity, no matter where they're from, to have the ability to have the opportunity to be an American citizen.
Yeah, the question of what to do with immigrants once they're already here is definitely a huge issue, especially the disparity between the two candidates' policies. Kathleen, I'm going to jump to you now on the issue, not necessarily about illegal immigration, but rather about the refugee crisis that's been going on. I know that Trump and Clinton have very differing policies on this, so I want to get your views.
Personally, I think that we really need to look at these immigrants as these refugees, as people. I think a lot of times they're very marginalized as others, and I don't think that that's a very positive way to look at other people. This othering is very, very, very detrimental to the morale of the world, not even just the United States. I think we need to seriously sit there as a country and say, are we going to stand by while other people in this world are hurting? Children and women and the elderly are hurting in this crisis. And I don't think America's ever been the country that's stood aside before, and I don't understand why now we're taking that sort of stance.
That's definitely a good point. I think many people are also concerned with the potential security risks that come along with allowing the refugees to come into the country. And I was wondering if any of you guys might have a counter to that or would like to extend that point.
Well, so far we've not had an occurrence where illegal immigrants have come in and actually pose the sort of security threat that we saw in 9/11 or other bombings such as the Boston Massacre. So, and the research does show that these people coming to the United States are coming here for economic reasons and not to engage in terrorism or all that malfeasance. So there's no evidence, in my opinion, to warrant those kind of fears.
That's definitely a good point to make. We're then going to transition then into the idea of also visas. Trump and Clinton's policies definitely differ as well in regard to our approach to allowing people into the country to work and or study. Mwangala, I know this personally affects you, so I'm going to go ahead and let you start with that.
Well, I think the whole issue of the H-1B program, visa program, has not been very well thought out and well argued in this election. I think there's been a lot of labeling and name calling, mostly from the Trump campaign. You've seen a situation where people are saying immigrants, people in the H-1B program are coming here and stealing American jobs and that kind of thing. Well, perhaps there is some credence to that kind of claim, but if you look at the positive that these people actually bring to the table, they far outweigh all the negative impacts that they might have. For example, in Silicon Valley, companies like Facebook hire a lot of engineers from countries like India and other countries around the world. These people are doing very, 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 very valuable work, and they're not only are they doing that, but they're also engines for economic growth in this country. They're spearheading innovation in Silicon Valley and other areas of the U.S. economy.
That's definitely a great point. Unfortunately, there's a lot more to be said on this topic, but we are running out of time, so I'm going to have to throw it back to Kat and Frank. Guys, back to you.
To make it in today's campaign arena, you have to have strong, accurate data at your fingertips.
Let's take a look into how big data can lead to big victories at the polls.
Ads for candidates are everywhere, appearing in your social media accounts and on TV. These ads may seem random, but you were probably identified and targeted by a highly sophisticated mathematical algorithm. We asked government relations expert Peter Jacoby to explain the role of big data in campaigns.
It's a tool that can allow the less funded candidate to spend money more effectively and target more effectively and drive their voters to the polls.
The MIT Technology Review has credited President Barack Obama's 2012 campaign with revolutionizing the use of big data, helping raise record-breaking donations and eventually win re-election.
Every legitimate campaign will now have to incorporate a meaningful big data operation.
Campaigns continue to find new and more effective ways to connect with voters. While low-tech strategies like door-knocking and phone banks are still used, new tools are being developed to better apply data and communicate with voters. One of these tools is an addressable advertisement.
An addressable television ad is a relatively new technology that's been built into set-top boxes. And what it allows is an individual ad to be targeted to an individual house. So based on the specific viewers in that house interests and based on obviously where they live.
He says soon campaigns could implement newer strategies to better communicate with voters. For example, he says candidates could use chatbots, an artificial intelligence feature used in messaging apps to respond to voters and keep them engaged.
There will be strategies and techniques and tools that will develop to make campaigns more competitive. There will always be somebody trying to unseat the incumbent, looking for a different way to approach, kind of a different edge, and then that'll be adopted, mainstream, and then we'll start a new cycle of innovation and execution.
For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Aaron Walker with Wataru Ando and Carla Talley reporting.
This election has shown us how important it is to have a strong social media presence, because that's where decisions and influences are made and developed.
We're tracking what people are saying tonight on our media desk, where we find Jackie and Connor with the latest.
Welcome back to the Media Desk. In this segment, we're going to be analyzing and discussing different tweets currently trending throughout the election and what the people really want the viewers to see.
We turn to Twitter to see what's currently trending right now. Some of the top trends are #MyVote2016 and #ElectionNight.
Fox News recently tweeted Florida results with 91% in favor of @real Donald Trump over @Hillary Clinton, currently with a small margin of lead from 48.9% to 48.1%. #ElectionNight, #Fox News 2016.
Another really popular trend is #StayInLinePA. Katie McGinty tweeted, "Attention PA voters, if you're in line at your polling place by 8 p.m., #StayInLine."
Josh Shapiro, PA, also tweeted in regards to the Stay in Line PA. If you're in line to vote right now, please remain. As long as you're in line by 8 p.m., you can cast your vote. #StayInLinePA, #IVoted.
Polls in Pennsylvania closed at 8 p.m., but people were still in line to vote far past that. For example, Cornerstone Church was a place where many Lafayette students went and voted today. People were still in line and were told to #StayInLine after 8 p.m. Some of our friends even went during lunch today and had to wait about 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's been great. Campus Pizza even handed out free tickets for personal pizzas, making sure that everyone at Lafayette had a very interactive experience and was involved in this year's election. Truly was great.
That's great. It's a great assignment to make everyone come out and vote right now.
So yeah, Wayne Dupree Show, let's make America great again. #Vote2016, #MyVote2016, #Election2016, #VoteTrump. Yeah, clearly
Daft Lemmy tweeted, "An American friend of mine told me that every time he tried to vote for Trump, the machine changed it to Clinton. This is rigged. #ElectionNight."
Yeah, one can only hope that tonight's election results truly reflect who the American people want to be their president after election results come in tonight.
Next time, we want to hear from you. Respond to us and follow us on Twitter @LC Policy Studies. Back to you, Kat and Frank.
Welcome again to Laura McHugh from our production partner, PBS 39.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Kat. Thank you for watching. We're really proud tonight to partner with Lafayette College to present a student-produced broadcast called First Vote in a Polarized Age. It's the product of thousands of hours of work from more than 100 students across campus.
I can tell you just from being on Lafayette College campus that people are really, really passionate about this election.
This is the next generation of voters, and they have a lot of thoughts about this election that could change the future of American politics.
We're all doing this in the spirit of constructive feedback.
These are the future leaders. These are the people who are going to be forced to solve some of the great issues that are confronting us. And I think it's a nice window into what young people are thinking, and do we have any hope that they're going to be able to confront and have the tools to deal with these massive challenges facing us?
Video essays. This generates excitement, and that makes it fun for us and makes it more interesting for them.
The election night broadcast is kind of the marquee event of a policy studies education. It is what every policy studies major looks forward to, that they want to bring their best to.
We have students from, I think, almost every discipline, and we have 7 classes working on it right now for a total of more than 120 students.
What's great about having so many different students work on this is you have so many different perspectives and kind of areas of expertise.
There's like 2 seconds where he's like thinking.
Working on a team is absolutely the biggest thing you get out of this.
When we're trying to put on a broadcast like this, there are a lot of moving parts. At the end of the day, it has to get done. Like there's no extension, there's no, like, the election won't wait for us.
You hear from students later on say, you know, that was the best experience in my 4 years at Lafayette College, and I couldn't have gotten that anywhere else.
We're coming of age politically this year.
We're broadcasting live from Farallon Student Center.
I always credit these broadcast experiences for strengthening my teamwork skills. You're working with a bunch of other people to create a student-produced broadcast.
It's a great learning experience. Not only do you learn a lot about the election itself, but you get to work in teams like never before.
I would definitely say that I've strengthened my collaboration skills because I'm working with a lot of different students who come from like a lot of different backgrounds. But just being able to collaborate with them and being able to work to make this a reality and to make this broadcast come to life, I think that's a really awesome experience.
It comes up once every 4 years. It allows us to let students be truly interdisciplinary. Just yesterday, a student came up to me and said, really excited that this ties together my economics course, it ties together my political science course, and it's bringing everything together.
Just from a broadcast perspective, I learned how to use a camera, and I feel comfortable with it, and I feel comfortable enough to show other people how to use it. You learn as you go, and you pick up even more confidence the more broadcasts you do.
Being in a class like this, I feel I can definitely apply what I've learned here to the future.
More polls are closing. Carla, can you give us some updates on results?
Yes, I can. We have some new results coming in. We see that in Ohio, with 50% of the votes being reported, we see that Mr. Trump is leading with 51.70% of the votes, with Hillary Clinton trailing behind with 44.20% of the votes. So, Andrew, what do you have to say about this in Ohio?
Yeah, Carla, so things are looking up for Mr. Trump. The New York Times just said that Donald Trump now has a 54% chance of winning, as opposed to every single polling say that Clinton is likely to win. Here in Ohio, as I mentioned earlier, no Republican has ever won the White House without winning Ohio, so we have to think it's crucial for this election. Hillary Clinton's doing pretty well in the more urban areas, so we're looking at Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, some of the bigger cities in Ohio. Hillary Clinton, her voters are turning out, and she's handily winning those areas. However, what Donald Trump is getting is the mass majority of the state geographically, a lot of more rural areas, and he has appeal with blue-collar steel and coal workers, as I said earlier as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. And when we turn to the state of Georgia, we see that with 38% of the votes being reported, we see that Donald Trump is also leading with 59% of the votes. And we see that Hillary Clinton is trailing behind with 38% of the votes. So, Chris, what do you have to say about the state of Georgia?
Yeah, we're really going to be waiting on Atlanta. Atlanta has become a hotbed for educated northern young people to move to, and it's a very diverse city. That city single-handedly could bring Hillary Clinton to winning the state. It's such a huge city. It's so diverse. It's a new hotbed for the northern educated young people, and it's an interesting state. We're also going to wait on Savannah to bring in more. It's another big city, and in general, urban areas go more Democratic. So we're waiting on those two cities to be able to call the state. However, with 59% of the vote and 38% of the votes reported, Donald Trump has a really big lead. It's looking like it's probably going to go Donald Trump, but Hillary Clinton probably can't count her out until Atlanta is fully reported.
Okay. And when we turn to the state of Virginia, we see that with 85% of the votes being reported, we see that Donald Trump is also leading with 48% compared to Hillary Clinton, who's trailing behind with 46% and 46% of the votes. So now we're going to turn to Andrew to hear about the state of Virginia.
Yeah, Carlos, so pretty big developments coming out of the state of Virginia. As compared to 2012 with Mitt Romney's candidacy, Donald J. Trump is doing phenomenally in the southeastern Virginia area. As I said earlier, this is a huge blow to the Clinton campaign. Senator Tim Kaine, her running mate, a senator from Virginia. He was the former governor of Richmond and mayor of Richmond and governor of Virginia. He has a lot of ties in Virginia. It's pretty shocking to me, and I'm sure even more shocking to the Clinton campaign, that the state right now is leaning towards Donald Trump.
We're also going to be Evan McMullen's been polling it's oddly high. He has an odd amount of votes in Virginia. He's put all his money into Utah, so I don't know why Virginia's necessarily going in that direction. But if it gets really close, he could be pulling votes from Mr. Trump.
Well, that's very interesting. Thanks for that. We're going to have more results in just a few minutes. And now we're going to head back to the main desk with Kat and Frank.
Thank you, Carla. This year's election has changed the game for women across the political spectrum.
But it's not just what female candidates are saying that faces the lens of media scrutiny. It's also what they wear and how they look that makes headlines.
We spoke with Professor Joshua Miller, an expert in fashion and politics.
Dress is always about presenting an image. Hillary Clinton is presenting an image as a very well-trained professional woman who's not going to get distracted about her dress.
This may explain why Clinton is opting for pantsuits, which she is frequently seen wearing. It is an option that Miller says signals professionalism. Similarly, in an interview with Vanity Fair, President Obama described his view on presidential attire. "You'll see I only wear gray or blue suits," Obama said. "I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or wearing because I have too many other decisions to make." Miller says for men across the political spectrum, it is the same story year after year.
Men all have the suit, the tie, but the shirt, they've got the flag pin. Everyone, Obama has it, and there's really no variety allowed for men.
But women have a broader range of options to consider when they decide what message they are sending to the public through their clothing. For Clinton, the suit is the solution. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Joseph Sium with Hayden Walker and Emily Reagan reporting.
Certainly there will be discussions online tonight about who's wearing what, among other things.
Let's check back in with Jackie and Connor to see if that really matters to people and why.
Yeah, appearance and specifically pantsuits has definitely been a frequently talked about portion of this most recent year's election process. CNN even took the time to tweet about women wearing pantsuits on Election Day. The outfit is the symbol of Facebook group Pantsuit Nation, which has become a safe space for Clinton supporters who face antagonism from family or friends regarding their appearance in pantsuits. Plus, the pantsuit is a subtle way to make a statement with the bounds of not wearing candidate paraphernalia to the polls, which is restricted.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Connor and I are actually both wearing pantsuits right now.
Yeah, viewers, feel free to tweet at us who wore better, Jackie or Connor.
Lauren McNown said, "Pantsuits all the way, #I'm with her." It's clear she's definitely a Hillary Clinton supporter and she wants to make it known by being a fan of pantsuits.
Yeah, at Will Feldman tweeted, "Don't all suits have pants?" Definitely bringing to light a comedic aspect of what we're going to have on this broadcast, pointing out the obvious.
At LowMamba25 tweeted, "We can #Make America Great Again without pantsuits."
All right, awesome. Back to you guys.
Given recent high-profile hackings, many American people have begun to question electronic voting integrity.
What do the experts have to say about the safety of our voting system?
We traveled to Pennsylvania's state capitol building to meet with the Deputy Secretary for Elections and Administration, Marion Schneider, to discuss steps the government has taken to protect the election.
We're working with the Department of Homeland Security to test our systems and make sure that they're as secure as possible.
When asked to go into further detail, Deputy Schneider responded,
"If all of those procedures are followed, the risk of tampering or error is very, very low."
In order to get a more technical understanding of the issue, we traveled to Lehigh University to speak with Dr. Daniel Lopresti, an expert on voter security, about weaknesses of DRE voting counting systems.
This machine can appear to be doing exactly what we intend, but there's no way for the voter to actually really confirm what's going on inside the machine.
Today, the majority of counties in Pennsylvania use these DRE voting machines. When asked about what steps should be taken to reform the voting system, Dr. Lopresti responded,
Computer security experts believe that it would be safer to do voting with a system where there's a physical manifestation of the voter's intentions. And a good example of that is a piece of paper. We should enforce a requirement that there be a voter-verified paper audit trail.
While Dr. Lopresti had his concerns about the voting system, he left us with this.
The surest way for your vote not to count is not to vote.
For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Rachel Snyder with Maggie Carver, Will Feldman, and Hallie Gersten reporting.
Candidates certainly spend plenty of time talking about the issues, but many times people just want to know who they really are.
So that means the candidates have been pretty creative this election season to try to reach voters any way they can.
People can
candidates spend much of their campaigns trying to look the part, but sometimes those candidates have to throw caution to the wind and look like this.
To see a presidential candidate playing the saxophone in sunglasses was very different than what we had grown up with.
According to Chris McCumber, president of entertainment networks at NBC Universal, politicians leverage the screen time to appear more relatable to their audience. We caught up with McCumber when he visited campus this fall.
A lot of people vote based on gut, based on if they connect with a politician. And if you see that politician in a much more human light, you're more likely to get people who are going to vote for you. If they like you, they're going to vote for you.
While McCumber says appearing relatable is very important, the goal of these appearances is to win over undecided voters.
The presidential candidates know that they need to reach audiences that are not necessarily watching traditional news, and they need to go where the eyeballs are. Every political candidate has to figure out, how do I get the independents coming over to my side?
While candidates have a lot to gain from late-night television exposure, there's something in it for the networks too.
Ratings, ratings, ratings. Politicians, presidential candidates are essentially celebrities, in our culture.
McCumber's emphasis on viewership not only applies to networks, but also to the candidates in this upcoming election.
If you're a candidate running for office, you want your bit to go viral in a positive way to get more, to get more exposure.
For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Natalie Gosnell with Nicole Crilly, Connor Bitterman, and Lizzie Salk reporting.
This evening, we'll find out what worked and what didn't. Time for a check on the results right now. Carla is standing by with the latest. Carla?
Thank you. So we see that in the state of Wisconsin, we see that with 3% of the votes being reported, we see that Republican Ron Johnson is in the lead with 57%. So is this something that was surprising, or is this something that we expected?
Really, early vote counts are always going to be Republican. Traditionally, the rural districts are the ones that are able to count it the quickest because they have the least amount of votes. So we're going to wait on states like cities like Milwaukee, Green Bay. These are the states that are really going to push it towards Russ Feingold. Democrats really need this seat. If they don't win it, they have no chance of winning the Senate. So Russ Feingold's probably going to pull ahead with Milwaukee and Green Bay and cities like that.
So we're definitely saying that Feingold will actually win.
I believe, yeah.
Well, great. So when we turn to the state of Pennsylvania, we see that in the race, we see that Republican Toomey is actually leading, and we see that Democrat McGinty is trailing behind, actually. Sorry about that. We see that Democrat McGinty is actually leading the polls right now. So, Andrew, what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, Carla, this was a very close race. Has been one of the most harshly polarizing debates between these two candidates. We've seen a very divisive campaign, personal attacks on each other, much like the presidential race. I'm sure words like personal attacks and divisive all sound familiar to us. Again, this is a bit surprising to me. I think it's going to be a very close race, so we'll definitely just have to keep an eye on this one, Carla.
And again, Democrat McGinty is actually leading the polls right now. So, when we turn to the state of New Hampshire, we see that between Kelly Ayotte and Maggie Hassan, we see that Kelly Ayotte is leading the polls with 48%, trailing behind is Hassan with 46% of the votes. So, Chris, Andrew, what do you guys have to say about this?
Yeah, once again, we're going to have to wait for more polling to come in. Democrats are more urban areas. New Hampshire is not really urban. It kind of is. But we're going to wait on Concord, Manchester, cities like that. That's what we're really going to be waiting on to see if Maggie Hassan can pull ahead. Once again, as Andrew said earlier, we're thinking that Kelly Ayotte's going to pull this one out. It's been tight, a lot of money, $120 million poured into this race. So it's going to be a tight one. We'll have to keep waiting to see how Maggie Hassan can come back with more urban areas in New Hampshire.
Okay, great. And when we talk about Virginia.
Yeah, the House races are really important for the Democrats. They're going to be down 30 seats. Unlikely that they can pull that many up, but there are going to be districts like this one in Virginia. The Republican incumbent, Barbara Comstock, she was a person that said, I will not be voting for Trump. In a state like Virginia, that's huge because Tim Kaine is the senator from there, governor, mayor of Richmond. Clearly there's a big influence there, and for her to distance herself from Mr. Trump after his lewd comments that he made to Billy Bush really is representative of a lot of Republican women. Kelly Ayotte did the same, and this might be why she's up 55% to 45%.
Well, thanks for that. We'll have more results in just a few minutes, and we're going to head back to the main desk again with Kat and Frank.
We've been talking tonight about how social media has become an increasingly hot topic this election season.
Our researchers set out to examine the impact social media has had on political polarization.
According to 2016 surveys conducted by the Pew Research Center, half of the members of both parties described the other as making them feel frustrated. We talked with Professor Sorrell, an expert on political science, to get her opinion on the subject.
Social media is good at talking to people who already support you, who go out of their way to follow you. People can choose exactly what viewpoints they want to hear. You can find yourself in these bubbles where you're only exposed to certain issues.
Social media sites, though convenient for political expression, news, and discourse, may actually be driving us further apart, not bringing us closer together. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Zach Wolfenson with Abby Smith and Will Helamandaris reporting.
Certainly everyone has been talking about this election, including our Lafayette student community.
Let's go to our bullpen to see what's on the minds of students. Barker Carlock has that. Barker?
Thanks, Frank and Kat. We're back here in the bullpen, and we've got some exciting things to talk about. I'd first like to introduce who we have. We have Luis Espinal, Katie Martinez, Marie Buckland, and Cooper Buxenhurt. Now, I want us to talk a little bit about a survey that our first-year students here conducted in a class called Politics and Polling that Marie and Cooper have both been involved in. So why don't we just get to it? Tell us what you found in this survey.
Well, we did a student body survey that was sent out to the emails of the entire student body. About 440 students responded, which is about 17% of the entire student body here at Lafayette. Overall, we asked basic demographic questions, such as your gender, your race and ethnicity, some more college-based questions, your class year and your major, and then, of course, your party affiliation, who you might be voting for. And we asked students to identify 3 issues out of a list of popular issues that they felt were most important to them.
Interesting. So, Cooper, I wonder if you could speak a little more in detail about what you found in this survey.
Well, Barker, what we found was that a large portion of the campus, a very large portion, about 72% support Hillary Clinton, while only about 15% support Trump, and the rest went to the others. And then additionally, that while virtually all of the registered Democrats support Hillary Clinton, only about 54% of the registered Republicans support Trump.
Interesting. Any responses to that from you all?
Yeah, I personally find that very interesting, coming from somebody who struggled a lot with this election. I'm personally somebody who identifies myself as an independent and somebody who is maybe fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I feel as when I talk about Clinton that I get a lot of praise. However, when I talk about Trump, I tend to get a little bit more hate and tend to be ostracized. And I think at the end of the day, independent candidates really need to decide what matters most to them, and whether that's policy or, maybe it's who the candidates are as people, or maybe even voting against the other candidate.
Great. So I wonder, what else was surprising in the survey?
Well, when we look at the total the student reaction to the issues, the majority of the students, about 60%, identified social issues as one of their top priorities or main focuses for this election. Next was the economy and jobs, about 54%, and surprisingly to me and to the rest of our class, climate change was third with 38%. And then when you look at by class basis, social issues and economy and jobs were pretty even. However, the only thing that was quite surprising was within the sophomores, immigration actually pulled higher than economy and jobs.
All right, Luis, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you bring up the point that you feel that you identify as socially liberal and fiscally conservative, and I actually hear that viewpoint a lot in here. But what does that mean to you? Because to me, I don't see how the two can be different. I mean, I see fiscal policy very much going along, social issues and whatnot. So how is that different to you?
So, Luis, that is a great question, but unfortunately we're out of time for this segment. So we will have to hold that for now, and we'll dive into that a little more in another one of our bullpens. So, Kat and Frank, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks, Barker. We're back with Laura McHugh from PBS 39. Laura?
Thanks, Kat. Thanks, Fred. On behalf of PBS 39, I'd like to thank our viewers for spending their election night with us. It's certainly turning out to be a historic night. And we want to thank Lafayette College for inviting us to participate in this unique educational event. If you're just watching or you're just tuning in, you're watching First Vote in a Polarized Age, a program produced by Lafayette College students analyzing the critical issues they're facing today. We're proud to present this program on PBS 39 and give young voters, who now make up the largest group of voters in the United States, a voice on public media.
Thank you, Laura. Let's get an update from our political desk. Carla, any new results?
Yes. We have some new results coming in. We see that in North Carolina, Trump is leading with 3 points. 81% of the votes are in that state. We see that in Florida, Trump is also leading by 1 point, with 95% of the votes in that state being in. And we see that in Michigan, Trump is up by 4 points, with 24% of the votes being in. And in the state of New Hampshire, we see that Trump is also up by 2 points, with 41%. And in Ohio, Trump is leading by 10 points, with 70% of the votes being in. So now we're going to turn to our student analysts just to hear about the different scenarios that may come up tonight. Chris and Andrew, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, Carla, this is huge. These are definitely some very unexpected results. So let's take a look at what this all means. Assuming these polls stay, these 6 states that Carla just mentioned, we have Florida going red, North Carolina going red, Ohio going red, New Hampshire going red, and then Michigan going red. Trump is also leading the state of Wisconsin. I'm not even sure he thought he could win that, but right now he's leading, so let's say that goes red. And with these states, assuming with these poll numbers stick, Donald J. Trump will be the 45th president of the United States with 289 electoral votes.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you there, right there, Andrew. I still think that Michigan will be going to Secretary Clinton and Wisconsin. Once again, it's the rural vote that comes in first. So we're still waiting on the more urban areas, Detroit, Milwaukee, Green Bay. We're going to be waiting on those. I believe Secretary Clinton still gets Pennsylvania. From there, Virginia's gotten way closer than anyone in the Clinton campaign thought it would get. But let's just say that Richmond and the cities in Virginia, the northeast corner, which is the more urban area, hasn't really come in yet. Let's say that goes to Secretary Clinton. Suddenly we've got ourselves a dogfight. From there, if she can pull out Nevada and Colorado, she's got the presidency. While much closer than anyone's really anticipated at this point, I still think that Secretary Clinton wins it. But as Andrew said, it's much closer than anyone thought it could be.
And what we see tonight in these results, does this have anything to do with the amount of money that's been put into these races by the 2 candidates?
I think it has a lot to do with money, absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with the ground game. But on top of everything, I think these results, what we're seeing so far, is not necessarily proving, but playing into Trump's campaign message that the polls are rigged, that the system is rigged, that he's going to win no matter what all the networks say. So, CNN, New York Times almost have been giving this election to Clinton. I'd bet they're pretty surprised. We're definitely going to see a far narrower race than anyone expected. I think we just went from the beginning of the broadcast to talking about how on earth Trump could pull this out. Now we're looking at how on earth Secretary Clinton could pull this out.
Well, thanks for that. That was very interesting. So now we're going to turn back to the main desk with Kat and Frank.
Thank you, Carla. According to the Small Business Administration, 99.7% of businesses in America are small businesses with less than 500 employees.
That means small business owners have a huge interest in what the candidates have been talking about regarding issues that surround the bottom line.
Juan Martinez owns Don Juan Mex Grill on College Hill in Easton. He opened the restaurant in 2010 and is now in the process of opening his 3rd location with 15 employees total.
And Don Juan is a creation of, my love for food, the passion for the culinary arts, and a combination of my wife's and my culture.
Martinez expressed concern over some proposed policy changes discussed during this election cycle, including an increase in the minimum wage.
It's going to force us owners to automate systems, self-service machines, self-service stations, which is going to hurt employees because we're going to have to lay them off. And instead of having 7 staff members, we're going to go down to 3. Our profit margins are, 10% of sales, so very low. So a tax rate of hike of 10% could vanish our profits. So might as well not be in business at all.
To learn more, we went to downtown Easton to visit Sid Lex Styles barbershop owner Arthur Dennis, who goes by AD, and 2 of his clients, Lorenzo and Al. All 3 had strong thoughts about the future of small business with a new president in the White House.
If Clinton goes into office, I'm going to be
exactly where I'm at right now. Same position. If Donald Trump goes into office, I think I actually might have a chance to make some money.
I'm all for entrepreneurship and people want to be entrepreneurs. That's great. But it cannot be the Wild Wild West. And I hear Trump talking about, taking away regulations, and I don't know what that means because he hasn't really expanded upon any of that.
I don't think many of us know what he means some of the time. But I believe that if a person has a sound idea and they have the right backing and capital, it shouldn't be extremely difficult.
Small business owners like Juan and AD say they count on elected officials to support them with not just words, but actions. For PBS 39 in Lafayette College, I'm Chris Burns with Luis Espinal and Ben Janasek reporting.
With President Obama leaving office soon, the future of healthcare policy in the U.S. is still unclear.
What could be the impact of a new president on the local healthcare providers and the entire healthcare industry?
Since 2010, when President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law, nearly 11.7 million Americans have used the legislation to gain access to health insurance. In Pennsylvania, the number insured via Obamacare has surpassed 470,000. We spoke with Jane George of St. Luke's Health Network to understand what the future of healthcare policy in America could look like following the 2016 election.
It's kind of hard to know how it's going to impact hospitals or anybody really. Because if you look at healthcare, we have two candidates that have two very diverse healthcare platforms. On one side, we have Mrs. Clinton, who says that she's very much in favor of the Affordable Care Act. What she wants to do is expand it, and then she also wants to improve things that aren't working. On the other side, our other candidate, Mr. Trump, says he wants to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
In the pharmaceutical and medical devices industries, leaders like Don Morell, former CEO of West Pharmaceutical Services in Exton, are concerned about how changes in legislation could impact their businesses.
So I think the biggest issue for companies like West and for the larger med device providers of the world is how do we make good investment decisions for our shareholders with an incredibly uncertain regulatory landscape.
Meanwhile, Melissa Reed of Planned Parenthood in Allentown has strong concerns about the impact its election could have on the future of women's healthcare issues.
It's very important for us to continue the efforts of the Affordable Care Act. It has made tremendous strides in improving public health and increasing access to health care for millions of Americans.
With increased access, healthcare costs continue to rise under the Affordable Care Act, which is something most policymakers agree still needs to be addressed. Each of the industry professionals we talked to also stressed the importance of House and Senate races to the future of Obama's namesake legislation. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Anna Ivinsky with Rachel Robertson reporting.
No shortage of things to talk about tonight.
How do Lafayette students feel about the role of government, and especially regarding the future of healthcare policy?
Cameron, what are some views from the bullpen?
Thanks, Frank and Kat. I'm joined here in the bullpen by Joseph Sayum, Kathleen Nolan, Katie Martinez, and Mongala Samata. And this time around, we're going to talk about the issue of healthcare and the role of government. We're going to start with Obamacare, so Kathleen, I'm going to throw it over to you.
All right, thank you. So I have a very strong opinion about Obamacare. I think it's a good thing in the idea of it. It does need a lot of work, but I personally have a pre-existing condition that would prevent me normally to receive health care. It doesn't impact any aspect of my life. It doesn't affect my health in the slightest, but because it is there, I can be denied. And I think that's just completely immoral, honestly. I think if we're a country that truly believes in equality and freedom for everyone, health equality is something that should be taken into consideration, and it's something that the government should be providing for its citizens. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. But it's not a system we should completely eliminate from our society either.
The idea of equality provided by Obamacare is definitely one of its main tenets. However, some people disagree with the idea of the government having a role in publicly funded health care. I'm going to throw it over to Mongala on this one.
Well, the big problem with government being involved in public health care is that you have issues of liberty and issues of freedom of religion involved there. If you take away the right of people to choose what sort of health care they can access, then you're going against their rights. And the problem with Obamacare in this regard has been, I think, best exemplified by the Hobby Lobby case. Hobby Lobby and Sebelius, where Hobby Lobby was required to provide contraceptives to their employees. So in that case, you do have all these big problems, and you have to be very, very careful with how you approach it.
That's definitely a good point. Joseph?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, the big problem with Obamacare is that, it's not, comprehensive and that it has helped everyone. I tend to disagree because there's a large population of, lower income people and those that are from worse socioeconomic backgrounds that, really need systems that, the government to step in and, mandate and ensure health care for a lot of people. So although it's not perfect, it is needed and necessary.
Exactly. I think one of the main issues, though, some people might have regarding the public coverage, like Mongola State, are some of the social issues involved in healthcare. Katie, I know you have a lot to say on this.
Yeah, personally, healthcare isn't something that I've focused on as much during this election because it's not going to affect me until I'm 26 when I'm off of my parents' healthcare. But something that has really had an effect on me, or something that's important to me, for better words, is abortion. With somebody who has a conservative view on abortion, I still believe that it should be legal, but only within the first trimester.
That's definitely a fair point. I think a lot of people have some concerns regarding the idea of Obamacare and healthcare in general, leading to decisions being made on this without their ability to give any input. I wonder if anyone has any final thoughts on that.
Just in terms of abortion, I think people think of Planned Parenthood as that's their sole purpose, and it's not. In fact, no government funding goes towards the funding of abortions. That's separate. That's given by private donations. What the public funding goes to is women's health, things like mammograms and daily checkups. That's really, really where the funding goes.
Absolutely, and there's absolutely a lot more to be said on this topic. However, we're actually out of time, so Kat and Frank, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thanks, Cameron. Time to check in on the results and what the numbers mean with Carla Talley and our analysts. Carla, how's it look?
Let's recap the Pennsylvania state Senate races. Republicans have claimed 3 out of 25 seats with 25% of votes in the Pennsylvania House State House. Republicans have claimed 91 seats. Democrats have 68 seats. We'll continue to update you on these races throughout the night. And now we're going to turn to the House seats. We see that in New Jersey in the 5th District, we see that Democrat Gottheimer is leading with 52% of the votes, and Republican Garrett is trailing behind with 46% of the votes. So what do you guys think about this? Is this something that was surprising?
Scott Garrett is a chairman of the Finance Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, establishment Republican. In an anti-establishment year, it's going to be pretty hard for that's why he's struggling. But for someone that's so well known across the nation, it's pretty shocking that he might lose his district to a former Hillary Clinton speechwriter.
Very interesting. And then when we turn to Maine, in the 2nd District, we see that Democrat Kane has 47.5% of the votes, and we see that Republican Polklin has 52.5% of the votes. And Chris or Andrew, do you have anything to say about the Maine 2nd District?
Yeah, I'm actually from right about here, so this one really affects me. Emily Kane, this is a rematch from 2014. Bruce Polklin he's a little bit like Donald Trump, along with our governor, Paula Page. It's that same pretty brash conservatism. Emily Kane is your traditional Democrat. She was the majority leader in the state Senate in Maine. It's just a rematch. It's going to be interesting. We're going to wait for cities like Augusta, Lewiston. Those are going to be the ones that are really going to decide the Maine 2nd.
Well, thank you for that. And then when we turn to New Hampshire in the 1st District, we see that Democrat Shea Porter has 42.6% of the votes, and we see that Republican Kunta has 43.7% of the votes, with 39% of the votes being in right now. So, Chris, Andrew, what do you think about New Hampshire in the 1st District?
This is going to be another one that the Democrats are just looking to flip. Right now, it's a tight race, but the Democrats need to flip 30 seats. Pretty unrealistic, but it's races like this that the Democrats are going to need to flip. So.
Very interesting. And then we're going to turn to the Pennsylvania in the 8th District. We see that Senator Serio is running, and he has 49.1% of the votes. And we see that Republican Fitzpatrick has 50.9% of the votes. And this is the Pennsylvania 8th District. So, Chris, Andrew, what do you guys have to say about this in the 8th District?
Right, again, this follows the trend that we've been seeing about Republicans most likely retaining the House. Here in Pennsylvania's 17th District, where Lafayette College is, there's a not-so-tight race between incumbent Democratic House of Representatives Matt Cartwright versus Lafayette alumnus Matt Connolly. It's very likely that Matt Cartwright will retain his seat. Additionally, in the Pennsylvania Attorney General race, there's, of course, a special election after the former Attorney General Kathleen Kane was forced to resign from her position after many scandals and a perjury indictment. Right now we have the Democratic candidate Shapiro running against the Republican candidate Rafferty, and right now the Democrat Shapiro is polling almost double digits ahead of his Republican counterpart.
Oh, that's very interesting. So we'll be back with more results in just a few minutes, and now we're going to head back to the main desk with Frank and Kat.
Thank you, Carla. Campaign slogans are displayed prominently in presidential candidates' campaigns.
We sent our reporters to find out what exactly makes an effective, memorable campaign slogan.
In this presidential election, both candidates have put a huge emphasis on their campaign slogans, some of which have made more of an impact on students for various reasons. We talked to Michael Drabenstadt, who has extensive background in creative services and marketing, about the purpose and value of slogans in this election.
It provides a central point, a central idea that is constantly reinforced by everything else that's done. It needs to be meaningful to the audience, but it needs to be represented in who you are and what you stand for.
We asked students on campus if they knew the slogans of the 2016 presidential candidates.
Hillary's is Stronger Together and Donald Trump's is Make America Great Again.
Make America Great Again is Donald Trump's slogan, and Hillary Clinton's would be I'm with her, right?
I think the slogan for Hillary Clinton is either I'm with her or something along those lines.
I know Let's Make America Great Again, and I don't know Hillary Clinton's.
Drabenstadt offered an explanation as to why many of the students we spoke with were more inclined to remember Trump's slogan.
So I think it's a true reflection of their personalities and also of what they care about.
We asked Drabenstadt his opinion on the 2016 candidates' campaign slogans.
When you look at Trump's slogan now, Make America Great Again, that's really what his message is. When you look at Hillary Clinton's, and I'm talking primarily about Stronger Together, to me that's a reflection of her personality.
The students we spoke with said that they have become familiar with Trump's slogan because of his strong media presence. Drabenstadt says campaign slogans that embody a candidate's personality can help students to remember slogans when they head to the voting booth. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Kelly Waldell with Megan Riley and Joseph Teddick reporting.
One feature of this presidential election has been the language that both candidates use.
We had our reporters break down each candidate's speech patterns and what appeals to voters and what doesn't.
As we reviewed the presidential candidates' speeches, we wanted to learn if and how their language impacts voters' decisions. To gain further insight, we traveled to Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia to interview sociolinguistic expert Professor Jamie Thomas.
I teach critical discourse analysis, and this is a method of looking at what comes across in the media and what comes across in print and on screen to understand how power and authority are encoded in communication.
We showed Professor Thomas multiple clips from each candidate, starting with Mr. Trump.
Extreme vetting. We are going to areas like Syria where they're coming in by the tens of thousands because of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
He patches together different shorter phrases so that it becomes more challenging, I think, to follow his thought pattern, but also he does it in a way that makes it feel like he is speaking impromptu and that he's coming across in a very sort of naturalized pattern.
Then we asked her impressions of Secretary Clinton.
Are children suffering in this catastrophic war, largely, I believe, because of Russian aggression?
Clinton is very oriented towards talking points, towards specific sort of phrases that refer to points of her plan, right? And that goes for people who are plan-oriented, who want some details and feel like they're getting details from these candidates.
After analyzing the candidates' language, Professor Thomas describes this election as both unnerving and exciting. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Jackie Drago with Adam Hoppus, Jane Feldmesser, and Katie Martinez reporting.
What are voters talking about right now?
Jackie and Connor are tracking that at our media desk. What do you have for us?
Welcome back to the media desk. It's been a little while. I'm Connor Bitterman.
And I'm Jackie Drago.
And with us, we have Wataru Ando, who was mentioned earlier in our election broadcast, who conducted a competition throughout Lafayette College this past week. Wataru, what are the results that have come in lately?
So there has been very close races, including Virginia and North Carolina, which comes as a surprise for many of the students because the data shows that many of the students have predicted that North Carolina and Virginia would both be taken by Senator Clinton.
Can you just remind our audience again, what are the close polls that they have to win in order to get this?
We have asked the students to predict the 30 closest races of Senate, House, and presidential.
And Wataru, if you wouldn't mind sharing again with our viewers, what is the awesome prize that they're going to win if they were able to pull out this competitive election competition?
Yeah, sure. So the prize of this competition will be two tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to the inaugural ball, and $1,000 to cover the expenses.
Yeah, who is currently in the lead?
So far we have 59 students out of the 500 students who have submitted their prediction, having a perfect score of 5 out of 5 races.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm sure these students are going to be up all night trying to watch the elections to see if they have a chance to win.
Yeah, clearly looking at the results, Lafayette College students have done a great job predicting elections. I'm sure all professors out there in the Gov Law Department are going to be rest assured and sleep easy tonight knowing their students are on top of their work.
Completely. Is there any other states that you think are going to be close?
I think Florida, which has turned into a more on Mr. Trump's side, might be a very surprising outcome for many of the students as well.
Thanks again, Wataru, for the update. It'll be interesting to see where this election poll goes throughout the night. Back to you.
Thanks, guys. The empty seat on the Supreme Court, left by the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia, was a major topic throughout this election season.
With big issues coming up for review, a new president could change the future of the Supreme Court.
Next year, the Supreme Court will hear the case of Gavin Grimm, a transgender male in Virginia. He used the men's bathroom for the first few weeks of school until some parents called in concerned. He saw this as a violation of Title IX and his 14th Amendment right. Adrian Shanker, the executive director of Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center in Allentown, will be watching the outcome of this case closely because of the impact it will have on youth and schools in the Lehigh Valley.
You know, they deserve the right to use the bathroom in accordance with their gender identity, and that's at the core what this case is about, which is about the ability for people to be treated equally in public schools.
Shanker says some local schools have already addressed this issue.
The Bethlehem School District has affirmed the rights of their students to non-discriminatory learning environments, and they understand that that includes the right to use a bathroom in peace.
The president's next appointee to the Supreme Court will affect the decision in this case and potentially many more. Lafayette professor Bruce Allen Murphy is the author of best-selling biography Scalia, A Court of One. He says the next president will have to fill at least one seat.
We have had a conservative court since 1970-71, just looking at which president is actually doing the appointing. So for the Republicans, this is a major shift. If Hillary Clinton were to win in November and appoint the next justice, it is quite a shift. And there's a reason why the pollsters are saying that 85% of the voters think this is a very important issue.
For PBS 39, I'm Kathleen Nolan with Frank Aluzzi reporting.
We are joined again by Laura McHugh from PBS 39.
Kat, Frank, thanks so much. For those of you who are joining us at home, you're about to enter the last half hour of First Vote in a Polarized Age, Lafayette College's election night coverage. This program was produced by students and is being broadcast live from Farallon College Center at Lafayette College, located in Easton, Pennsylvania. The students you're seeing tonight, including Kat and Frank, voted in their first presidential election today. And at PBS 39, we're proud to present coverage from students and by students on this historic night. We'd like to applaud Lafayette College for providing this educational opportunity to their students and for inviting us to be a part of it.
Thanks so much. We're going back to our political desk for an update on the polls. Carla, what's going on right now?
You got first three, I got
So we
last.
see that in the presidential election.
what's
We
the-
see that in the state of Pennsylvania. We see that in the state of Pennsylvania, Secretary Clinton is leading by 9 points. We have 43% of the votes reported right now. And then when we turn to the state of Michigan, we see that Donald Trump has 49% of the votes, with Hillary Clinton trailing behind with 45% of the votes. So Chris and Andrew, for Michigan and Pennsylvania, are these surprising results that we have so far?
I think Michigan's a bit more surprising, yes. As I said earlier in the broadcast, Donald Trump was going to need to swing a state that typically glows blue. Michigan hasn't gone red since 1988 with President Reagan's re-election, so I think that's definitely surprising. This is good news for Trump and his campaign. Looking at Pennsylvania, not too surprising yet. Most people assume that Clinton had a small leg up on Trump in Pennsylvania. However, it's worthy to note that under half of the state's votes have come in, but 90% of Philadelphia's votes have come in, which is very largely a Clinton demographic. So a lot of Clinton's votes from PA may have already came in, but we'll see what else happens throughout the night.
Okay. And then when we turn to the state of Wisconsin, we see that Donald Trump has 48%, with Hillary Clinton trailing behind with 46%. And of those votes reported, we see that 38% of the votes have been reported in Wisconsin. So is Wisconsin one of these states that we expected Donald Trump to win as well?
Again, it's similar to a Michigan. It hasn't gotten red in quite some time. I'm not sure if the Trump campaign thought that they could win Wisconsin. This is definitely good news for them. There's definitely a Republican presence in the state of Wisconsin. Paul Ryan's from Wisconsin, Scott Walker. They're controversial but nonetheless Republican governors. So who knows? Maybe Donald Trump will be able to hang on to this lead in Wisconsin.
Very interesting. And then when we turn to the state of Ohio, we see that with 74% of the votes being reported right now, we see that Donald Trump is also leading with 53% of the vote, and then Secretary Clinton is trailing behind with 42% of the vote. And Ohio is one of these must-win states for Donald Trump, so he's doing pretty well right now. Do you guys have anything to say about that?
Yeah, Ohio, we're still waiting on some votes coming out of
Well, actually, Chris, we just found out that Ohio has gone to Mr. Trump, so this is big news, and this is by PBS. We got this news from PBS. Ohio has gone to Trump. This is pretty big news. Do you guys have anything to say about this win for Trump?
Yeah, Ohio was one of the big three that he needed to win. It was Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida. Right now, he's well on his way to winning those three, which could mean the presidency. Obviously, he still needs to flip Michigan, which, you know, as Andrew said, it's a bit of a task. It hasn't gone red in a while, but he has to flip them. I was thinking that Cleveland and Cincinnati were maybe going to give Clinton a boost, but 10%, 11% is just something you can't overcome. When you're losing a state by that much, you can't really trust the cities. When the cities are here and here, and this entire swath is going to the other candidate, you have no hope of really winning the entire state.
Andrew, what do you have to say about this
This is
win?
certainly a huge victory for Trump. If Ohio had gone to Clinton, the race would be over for all intents and purposes. Donald Trump is alive and well in the race for the presidency. Yep.
Definitely, this is very big news for tonight. Now, we're going to turn over to Pennsylvania Senate race. We see that in the Pennsylvania Senate race, Republican Pat Toomey, he's leading with 42% of the vote, and we see that Katie McGinty, Democrat, Katie McGinty, Democrat, is leading with 53% of the vote, and Republican Toomey is trailing behind with 42% of the vote. So this is something that's, very important for us being from Pennsylvania. So what do you guys have to say about this lead for Katie McGinty?
As Andrew talked about with the Pennsylvania presidential race, Philadelphia has a lot of their votes reported, which is pretty incredible. I saw some lines earlier today. Philadelphia had lines at 6:30 a.m. ready to vote. So we're going to be looking at the rest of the state essentially to really bring Pat Toomey back up that 10-point margin. But right now it looks like Katie McGinty looks relatively safe, but honestly, we still have a lot to go, only 42% reporting. No one's really going to call this quite yet. We still got to wait for this part, while Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and maybe the Easton area are probably going to go towards McGinty.
Very interesting. And then we turn to the Senate race in North Carolina. We see that Republican Burr has 51% of the votes, and we see that Democrat Ross has 45% of the votes. Actually, just turning in, we just see that Republican Burr has actually won the state of North Carolina for Senate. So for this, is this something that is pretty surprising to you guys, or is this something that we expected?
This is one of the states that the Democrats were looking to flip, along with New Hampshire, Pennsylvania. This was one of the states. For it to be already called this early in the race at only 10:30, it's not looking good for the Democrats to get the House. never mind the presidency, it's not looking great. But Deborah Ross, relatively strong candidate, but the incumbent Richard Burr, he ran a great campaign in 2014. He's running a great campaign this year. While he is connected to Trump, clearly that's not affecting the rest of the country because the citizens are coming out in droves for Mr. Trump. So for Richard Burr to win here, not a huge surprise, but very good for the Republicans to maintain the Senate.
Okay, well, great, guys. Thanks for that. Exciting results from Ohio and the other Senate races that we've talked about. So now we're going to head back to the main desk with Frank and Kat.
A September 2016 Gallup poll showed that 70% of Americans were dissatisfied with election procedures in the U.S.
Many are calling for reforms in how we elect our political leaders. Our reporters look to other democratic nations for ideas on how the rest of the world elects its leaders.
According to the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, the United States ranks 74th out of 113 countries surveyed in terms of voter turnout. In 2012, 54% of eligible Americans voted in the presidential election. So we examined how other countries have achieved higher voter turnout. Let's start with Brazil, one of 27 countries that uses mandatory voting. Guy Avila explains what it's like to vote in his home country.
It's electronic, it's very easy. You vote very close to your house.
Its last 3 elections averaged almost 80% in voter turnout.
I think because voting is compulsory in Brazil, it does tend to have people more involved because you do have to, in a way or another, have an opinion. And I think that may encourage people to getting involved.
Next, let's look at Germany. It's one of 108 countries that use a process called proportional representation. Germany's legislative body has substantial representation by 5 parties compared to America's 2-party system.
With Germany, you have that flexibility of not necessarily being tied to one party just because you're very affiliated with that.
Finally, we turn to South Korea for a look at how they handle campaign finance laws.
In presidential elections, only up to 5% can come from donations, and everything else needs to be funded publicly.
In 2015, America ranked 47 out of 139 countries on the Electoral Integrity Index. South Korea ranked 13.
And there's studies that indicate campaign finance laws actually do matter. They provide a basis for institutionalization of party politics, right? And parties, of course, are central to thriving and stable democracies.
South Korea, Germany, and Brazil provide just a snapshot of the voting laws and practices in effect in the 116 democratic countries across the world. For PBS 39 and Lafayette College, I'm Rebecca Y. with Kelvin Wright, Julia Hoffman, Catherine Wayback, and Noah Wessel reporting.
Our bullpen is ready to take on this topic.
Barker, how do students feel about the 2-party system here in the U.S.?
Hi, I'm Barker Carlock, and we're back here in the bullpen, and I'm here with Luis Espinal, Aiden Trevisan, Kayla McGee, and I'm sorry, remind me of your name. Mongala Samatai. It's difficult to pronounce, so I wanted to make sure I had it right. Okay, thank you, Mongala. So let's get into it. Are we content with the 2-party system? Kayla, would you like to start?
Yes, I mean, personally, I'm content with the 2-party system. I feel like the country is already so divided, and I mean, there's only 2 parties. There's really 2 to choose from. So I feel like if there were to be a multi-party system, that there would just be more options and the country would just be more divided.
Okay. Any responses?
Yeah, I actually disagree with that. I think that a lot of people throughout the country have the sentiment that they don't feel comfortable or they don't like the 2 candidates that we have, and I think it's because of our 2-party system. If we look at how we have Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton, we go back to the primaries, and if we look at our primaries are flawed. If you're not registered under a certain party, you're not able to vote on the primary, and so you don't have a voice in filtering, who you get to vote for on November 8th. I think that we need to make some room and restructure so that other voices can come up.
I agree with you, Luis. I believe that there should be more than a 2-party system, only because I feel like Americans feel pressure to either fall under the Republican or Democratic category. Personally, I am an independent and I am registered as an independent, and I do believe in both some Republican views and some Democratic views, but at the same time I feel like there should be a party that fits more people's views in general.
Well, I think that the 2-party political system actually works. I come from a country called Zambia,
And Zambia has multiple political parties. It's very, very, very hard for one to find out what these parties actually stand for. And none of us has time in this day and age to read 10 political party manifestos. As for the two-party political system here, I don't necessarily have to go and read the latest policy brief from the Democratic Party or from the Republican Party when I know in general what I'm getting when I'm voting Republican, what I'm getting when I'm voting Democrat. Yes, there's some discontent as to whether these parties actually get things done in Washington. But even if you had multiple political parties, you're still going to have that sort of gridlock. So I think it's an effective system. Can it be reformed? Yes, it can be reformed, but it works.
I mean, I do feel that if there was to be a multi-party system, this would be the presidential election where another candidate would come in, and I just don't see that happening. I feel like, I mean, we have two candidates that are very unliked, and I just don't feel like any third party has really come and like asserted itself in American politics, and I feel like if there was going to be one, this would be the election for it to happen.
I have to agree with you on that. I think that third party in this election is kind of a waste in a way. I think that since Hillary and Trump are getting so much media coverage and they're in the lead by so much, that I think that a third party vote would just be a waste, because I think that in the end that it's going to be Trump or Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the third-party system in this election is almost not relevant in terms of their chances of getting into office. But that's a product of our two-party system. We are so divided into the Democratic and Republican Party that there's no space in the media and in our circles for a third-party voice to come in. And think about it. Right now, we have the two most disliked candidates that we have ever had. How is that possible? It's possible because we have a two-party system. If we didn't, we probably would have Bernie running. We might have Ted Cruz. We might have a lot of other people who didn't get a chance to because they were X'd out. So yeah.
Well, I'm not quite certain that a multi-party political system might solve the sort of problem that you are looking at. Yes, the candidates themselves are disliked. But what about their policies? What about the platforms of the whole party? People that are Republicans still like the Republican Party platform, even if they don't agree to Trump. Can they vote otherwise to show their discontent? Of course they can. Can Democrats do the same? Democrats that voted for Bernie and don't like Hillary, they can still vote Democratic. Because Hillary is not the head of the party. The party is this bigger thing. It's bigger than the individual in any sense.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut it here. I know this is a hot topic, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I'm going to have to send it back to you, Frank and Kat. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barker. Let's go right over to the political desk for the latest results. Carla?
Thank you. So we see that in the state of Colorado, we see that Secretary Clinton is up by 5 points with 60. New news has just come in. We see that Secretary Clinton won the state of Colorado. Is this a surprising win for Clinton? What do you guys think about this win?
No, Carla, not too surprising for Clinton. It's a pretty typically liberal state, usually goes blue, also only has 6 electoral votes, so a good win for Clinton, but nonetheless won't be significantly affecting the election.
Okay, great. And we got that results with Clinton winning from PBS. Now we're going to turn to North Carolina. We see that Mr. Trump is leading by 4 points with 85% of the votes being in right now. Hillary Clinton has 46% of the votes. Donald Trump has 51% of the votes. So, Chris, Andrew, North Carolina, it's a huge battleground state. What do you guys have to say about Donald Trump winning right now?
Yeah, right, Carla. Let's go back to the 3 states I mentioned earlier: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida. Trump had to win all 3 to become president. He's got Ohio. It looks like he's got North Carolina. This is nothing but good news for the Trump campaign.
Great.
And along with that, it looks like he does have Florida. So those big 3 could all go where Trump needs them to go for him to be able to win.
Okay, great. And then we're going to turn it over to the Senate races. We see that in New Hampshire, in the Senate race, we see that Kelly Ayotte has plus 3 points with 51% of the votes being in right now. So New Hampshire with 51% of the votes being in right now. We see that Kelly Ayotte is in the lead right now. So Chris, Andrew, New Hampshire with Kelly Ayotte leading. What do you guys have to say about this?
Yeah, so I see that now more results are coming in. Kelly Ayotte is getting out to a slight lead. Again, this is what I did expect. Maggie Hassan has run a great race, definitely a commendable candidate, but I see Kelly Ayotte returning to the Senate.
This is going to be very competitive. Democrat Maggie Hassan, she's a governor. She's proven she can win a statewide statewide race. Kelly Ayotte has also proven she can win a statewide race. Everyone knew it was going to be competitive, and it turned out to be competitive. But Kelly Ayotte had held the margin throughout the polling process. Really, it hadn't been since early in the campaign where Maggie Hassan looked like she had a legitimate shot, but it was definitely going to be close with how much money the DNC poured into this campaign.
Great. And then when we turn to the state of Wisconsin, we see that Senator Johnson has 52.20% of the vote, and Democrat Feingold has 45% of the vote, and 43% of the votes are actually in right now. So Republican Johnson, he's leading right now. So what do you guys have to say about this in Wisconsin?
This is very odd. Russ Feingold was leading the polls all the way up until the election. It was getting a little slimmer. It got to about 3 points by the time election happened, but I was pretty certain that Russ Feingold was going to be able to win this. Ron Johnson won in 2010 a midterm election where voter turnout isn't as big, which normally is positive for the Republican Party. Russ Feingold is a beloved senator in Wisconsin. This was his previous seat. He just happened to lose it because it was a midterm election. But if Ron Johnson is able to win this, this is a signal that this is going to be a great night for the Republican Party. Bad for Russ Feingold, bad for other Senate candidates, and potentially very bad for Secretary Clinton.
Well, thanks for that update. And then when we turn to the House elections, we see that in Pennsylvania in the 16th district, we see that Democrat Hartman has 47.2% of the votes, and we see that Republican Smucker has 49% of the votes. So what do you guys have to say about the 16th district of Pennsylvania?
Traditionally a Republican state. It's an open Senate seat that's traditionally held by Republicans. Lloyd Smucker, great name. He's the one that's in the lead right now. It's about 2 points. It's probably going to go to him, but I would say that for it to be within 2 points is pretty surprising. It's a traditionally Republican district, and for Hartman to be within the margin, that says something. That says something about Pennsylvania, especially southeast Pennsylvania, that it might be leaning a little Democratic as we go on.
Yeah, it certainly just continues the positive trend that we see going for Republicans at the presidential ticket and down ballot tickets as well.
Okay, well, great for that thanks for that update, and we're going to turn back to the main desk with Frank and Kat.
And one last time to our media desk to wrap up the comments from this evening. Jackie and Connor?
Tonight, we've discussed a variety of media sources, from social media to traditional media. In this last segment, we're going to discuss 2 different newspaper articles that have recently been trending.
The New York Times headline is "A Deadlock Race and a Long Night Ahead." Donald Trump is showing strong among white, working class, and rural voters, which has kept him in the race against Hillary Clinton, especially in battleground states, just like the results team was talking about, Florida and North Carolina, which are crucial to his chances. If Mr. Trump wins these, he will have to win one of 6 competitive states: Colorado, Nevada, New Hampshire, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania to win the election.
And we're going to get back to you shortly with our results desk to keep you up to date with what's going on in the election results tonight. If it goes as they recently have mentioned, it sounds like this will be a good night for Donald Trump.
His strength among white working class voters makes that a real possibility. Even if he falls short, it will take a while to reach a decision.
Meanwhile, the Washington Post has recently been trending with "Florida closed, visions of the 2000 recount are in mind to our viewers." With the unpredictable battleground state of Florida neck and neck between Trump and Hillary, people understandably have started having visions, and in some cases, nightmares of the 2000 recount between George Bush and Al Gore. It'll be interesting to see where the state goes throughout the night. But our colleague Joel Achenbach spoke to lawyers earlier Tuesday about what would happen in the case of a recount. Apparently, the Democrats are lawyered up and ready to go if the state were to trend in Donald Trump's direction. Sounds like they might be a little nervous. Donald Trump's looking very good right now, and we'll see what happens in the state of Florida.
That's all for the media desk tonight. I'm Jackie Drago.
I'm Connor Bitterman. Back to you.
Thanks, guys. And our last check-in with the political update for the latest results at this time. Carla?
Thanks. So we're wrapping up tonight, and we don't really know what to expect for the rest of the night, but we see that right now Mr. Trump has 168 electoral votes, and Secretary Clinton has 131 electoral votes. So what are some of the different scenarios, Chris and Andrew, that can play out tonight?
Yes, so of course this is very exciting. Whether you support Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, this is a historic election. We've had a very intense campaign fought for almost a year and a half, so it's really great to be living through this history. What was once a very narrow path to Trump's victory is becoming very optimistic. So let's look at how he wins the White House. If he can pull off Florida, which is about a dead race right now, with almost all the results tallied, should be called relatively soon. He's got a very clear path. If the polls stay in Michigan and Wisconsin and these states go red, Donald J. Trump is our next president, folks.
Yeah, and I think it's a very different map. I think Secretary Clinton definitely gets Pennsylvania. That's going to be big for her. She needs those electoral votes real bad, the way that the polls are looking. I think that somehow she still pulls off Michigan. However, it's not looking great in the Rust Belt. Mr. Trump has won in Ohio. He's polling in Wisconsin. I mean, the polls in Wisconsin are close, which is pretty shocking. Secretary Clinton, I think, definitely wins that state. And suddenly, it's really close. We're looking at New Hampshire, which the polls are saying that it might go to Mr. Trump. And from there, if Secretary Clinton is able to pull off Nevada, she's got the presidency. However, if Mr. Trump is able to pull off Nevada, suddenly we got a real close race. And somehow the presidential election comes down to Maine's 2nd congressional. Well, I'm from there. I have no idea how it would come down to that. But that could be the difference between Mr. Trump winning, Secretary Clinton winning. That would be a pretty shocking scenario if that happened. But with the way that the polls are going, it might come down to Nevada and New Hampshire and Maine's 2nd congressional.
Well, this is very interesting. This has been a great night. We've been updating you with more results as it has come in, and we just want to know, what do you guys think about Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton? How do you think they were able to get these votes? How was Mr. Trump able to be in the lead right now? Is it money? Has it been other factors? What do you think are the main factors that have caused Mr. Trump to be in the lead?
Well, tonight's been a surprise. In the past 18 to 20 months, we've had nothing short of constant surprises with these two. So it's only fitting when November 8th turned out to be the same way. I think what it comes down to is the get out the vote efforts and honestly just voter turnout. A lot of people criticize the methodology of the polls. Who's taking these polls? How can we be sure that Clinton's leading? How can we be sure Trump's losing? I think the fact that so many Republicans clearly across the nation have come out and vote for Mr. Trump, have showed that his message have really resonated with them, is very surprising for a lot of us. I'm happy to see it. Some people may not be, but we'll see how the rest of the night plays out.
Yeah, voter turnout normally goes towards the Democratic side. However, Mr. Trump's been targeting voters that don't normally vote. These are people that are, in general, it's an uneducated voting bloc, but these people are coming out, which is great for American democracy, bad for a Hillary Clinton supporter. He's driving out the vote in record numbers. Andrew was just saying that in Pennsylvania, there have been record numbers in some of the districts that are traditionally Republican districts, which normally doesn't happen. It's really get out the vote campaign normally would be dominated by the candidate with more money, more grassroots effort, which would be Hillary Clinton in this case. However, Donald Trump's somehow been able to get people out to vote without having a great organization and really being a one-man army, while Hillary Clinton has Beyonce on her side, Jay-Z, LeBron James, the biggest names in America culture. And Donald Trump, with one person and one personality, has been able to drive out the vote, which is incredible and honestly incredibly unexpected.
Well, thanks, Chris and Andrew. Now we're going to head back to the main desk with Frank and Kat.
Thanks, Carla. What will the legacy of this election be?
The bullpen wraps up with a few comments on what that election will be. Cameron?
Thanks, Frank and Kat, and welcome to our final bullpen. I'm joined here with Joseph Sayum, Brenda Del Rio, Kathleen Nolan, and Katie Martinez, and we're going to be discussing the legacy that this election has had and the impact it's had on all of us personally. We're going to start off by looking back at all the negativity and slander that's happened in this election. Whoever wants to jump in, feel free.
Well, I'll just say that this election, this season has been a very dirty election in terms of, there's been very little decorum in class when it came to the candidates, and a lot of the negativity that has come apart from this, has come from the candidates themselves. So I think we as a country have a lot to learn from this election, and going forward, hopefully we'll do a little bit better.
Yeah, I personally feel as if both candidates do have a lot of baggage, and that's really come from the media, which is interesting. So to me, in this election, policy did matter more. However, with whoever wins, I am going to be a little nervous because I don't have 100% confidence in either candidate because of who they are as people and what's happened in the past.
That's a fair point. There's been certainly a lot of scandals with this election, and I was wondering what impact, if any, those scandals had on your vote. The media seems to be pushing those a lot, but it seems to me that it may not have as big an impact as some people may have thought on the young vote.
Yeah, definitely. I think scandals for me was something that the media important role really showed this election. With this election, more than any other election I've ever, been an active watcher of, has really influenced by the media and their constant pushing of the scandals, the email scandals, Trump's comments towards women. All of these things have just constantly been building on each other to the point where it made it seem like that was more what the election was about, was which scandal was going to win versus another scandal versus the actual candidates themselves.
That's definitely a fair point. And looking forward, I think we're going to try and look at the main issues, though, that are still up in the air depending on who wins this election. And there's certainly plenty that are very key to what swayed you and how you ended up making your decision. But looking forward, how does this impact your evaluation of yourself and how you lean with certain political parties? Many people maybe feel disenfranchised with one party or another, given that the candidate may not represent their own views. Brenda?
Yeah, so I think that this election has taught me a lot about how to look at different things in a different perspective. I personally don't agree with both of the candidates on a whole heart, especially with Trump. I feel like a lot of his scandals have outweighed a lot of Hillary's in the terms of like how bad they've been. I also don't think that he's very qualified to be the president of the United States, and I think Hillary, even despite the fact that even she herself is very corrupt, I think she's also one of the most qualified presidents. So I think with this kind of experience next election time, I think it's definitely a good thing to look more into like what they've done in the past and what they'll help to do in the future.
That's a fair point. I think given the fact that these two candidates are some of the most unpopular in history, a lot of people seem to be dissatisfied with those. Given that fact, do you think there's going to be any reforms that the two parties make in how they select their candidates in the future?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think both parties kind of learned their lesson with this election. No one is satisfied. The polls have been astonishing with how dissatisfied the public is with the options that we have right now. And I think going forward, senators and congressmen should work together and make reforms so that in the future we get a candidate that both parties can agree, or even if they're not the most qualified, or at least well liked by the general population.
That's a fair point. I think we focused a lot on the presidential election tonight, but then looking at the state, the Senate and the House as well, it seems as if that might actually lead to future gridlock. What do you think that effect might have on voter turnout and the participation of young people in the future?
Yeah, I think a lot of gridlock in Congress decreases voter turnout. I know that affects a lot of the public opinion on politics. There's a lot of political distrust in the public because of the fact that Congress seems to be really slow and sluggish, even if they do get things done. So I think if, for instance, we can make a Congress that's more compatible with one another and that's more willing to work with one another, that would definitely increase the voter turnout and the public trust in the government.
Fair point. And like always, there's still plenty more to be said on this, but for the last time, we're going to have to wrap it up from the bullpen. So for Barker Karloff and everyone else who's been on the bullpen tonight, I'm Cameron Schultz. Frank and Kat, back to you.
Thanks, Cameron. Well, tonight is turning into be a very close race.
Yeah, we're going to head back to our results desk for one final update. Carla?
Thanks. We have some really big news that just came in. We see that in the state of North Carolina, Mr. Trump just took this state, and this is by Fox News. And we see that in the state of Florida, Mr. Trump also took this state, reported by PBS News. So Chris, Andrew, what do you guys have to say about these two big results that just came in?
Again, this is absolutely huge. He did it. Trump won Ohio, won North Carolina, and won Florida. Now he is, for all intents and purposes, if he's 4 points up in Michigan right now. If Donald J. Trump wins Michigan, he's president of the United States. Say Michigan goes blue, Donald Trump can win a combination of the 10 electoral votes in Wisconsin and the 4 in New Hampshire, and again, he's president. This is looking very, very positive for Trump and his campaign.
And when we turn to the state of Michigan, we see that Trump is up by 4%, with 45% of the votes being in. And in Wisconsin, we see that Trump is up by 3%, with 56% of the votes being in. And in Pennsylvania, we see that Clinton is actually up by 2.5 points, with 66% of the votes being in. So, Chris, what do you have to say about these new results that just came in?
Yeah, Secretary Clinton can still absolutely win. Now it's coming down to Michigan. No one thought this would happen. It was about a 3-point race coming in tonight. However, if this goes to Mr. Trump, as Andrew said, it's over. Mr. Trump's your next president. However, if this goes to Secretary Clinton, ball game. We got Pennsylvania probably going to Secretary Clinton. Wisconsin also polling to Mr. Trump. Very odd. Really struggling with seeing what's happening there, but we still got to wait for a lot of the numbers to come in, with 43% still only reported in Michigan. If Secretary Clinton wins Nevada, which I believe she will, she still wins, but this is a much tighter race than anyone expected. I think it's 50-50. Absolute toss-up, maybe favoring Mr. Trump, especially in states with him competing in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. I mean, it's incredibly unexpected, and we'll have to see what happens throughout the rest of the night.
Well, thanks, Chris and Andrew, for joining me. It's been a pleasure. So this has been some really interesting results that came in, and I just want to thank everyone for watching with us tonight. So now we're going to head back to the main desk with Kat and Brink. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. As our broadcast comes to a close, we would like to thank everyone that helped us, from our dedicated faculty, especially Professors Mark and Nicole Crane, to the many students who have participated, to Laura McHugh, and to our consultants, Nancy Wertine and Chris Knight.
This has truly been a historic evening for the nation, but also for our Lafayette family, as we've learned that we can make our mark on the political process and the future of this country.
Thank you to our partners, PBS 39 and NEP, and to you for watching.
Good night.
In 1999, a joint resolution of Congress recognized the athlete of the 20th century. It was not Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig, Jesse Owens, or Muhammad Ali. Instead, it was a man today many have never heard of. An Indian from Oklahoma named Jim Thorpe. Jim